Permission to be honest. I think that we have got this whole waiting on God for business decisions thing actually backwards. We say that we need more clarity, more confirmation, more signs, but what if that thing that we're calling wisdom is actually fear wearing a really good disguise? I think that sometimes in our businesses, we're all waiting for the perfect clarity, right? We're waiting for the storm to calm down, for our fears to disappear, for every decision to feel completely certain. But what if, just what if, God is actually inviting us to step out in the middle of our uncertainty? The other day, I was looking through some of the amazing messages that I received last week from some of my business friends, some of my members within the Eden Empire community, and I noticed something that I thought was fascinating. I was getting messages like, should I pivot my business model? Should I hire new staff? Should I raise my prices? Right? Like all things that are common to other business owners, especially within this stage. But the thing that I found fascinating is each one of them was wrestling with some sort of decision. And what really struck me is underneath all of these questions was a deeper thought. How do I know if it's God's will or is it just my own fear talking? And it made me smile because I remember thinking back into this specific stage that I was within my business. And it wasn't even that long ago. And it's still things that I struggle with sometimes today, but it's this thought of needing complete certainty before I move forward. And it took me back to this place where I remember sitting at my desk one morning and I had my project management tool open and I had my content calendar out, my to-do list, everything was organized, right? Like I was trying to prepare for every possible scenario. I had all these systems in place, I had all these strategies that were mapped out, and I was thinking that if I just planned enough, if I just researched enough, it would make things feel a lot less scary for all these decisions that I was trying to make. And it was less like stepping out onto the water and more like walking on solid ground. The thing that I know about faith, though, is that it's not about having every step perfectly planned. Sometimes it's the tools that we create that help us to feel more secure can end up actually becoming that boat that we're afraid to step out on. And so it really hit me in this moment that as we are going through, and I'm going to be super practical with you, but as we're going through, sometimes it's not about having it figured out. It's about asking the right questions. It's not always about that decision. And I started asking myself in different ways all of these questions. And, I started to think, what does God actually want for my business? Does this create more space for what God has called me to do? Will this help me steward my gifts better? Will this align with the vision that God has placed on my heart? And when I started thinking of things in that perspective, something amazing happened. And this decision, or all of the decisions really that I was facing, they didn't necessarily become easier, but they got a lot clearer. And instead of trying to predict every possible outcome and every scenario that could happen, I started focusing more on the alignment of what God wanted me to do. And what's crazy is that sometimes the most faithful decision that we can make is often the scariest one. Stepping out on that boat is a lot similar to raising your prices when imposter syndrome is screaming at you. And sometimes it looks like saying no to something that looks good on paper because you know that it doesn't align with what God is calling you to do and because he's calling you to something different. And when I'm facing a big decision nowadays, the process that I have, and it's probably not going to be what you expect, but instead of starting with my strategy, which is crazy because I'm a strategist, right? I start with surrender. And before I open up my laptop, I make my list, or before I make my list, I end up, before anything else, I spend time sitting with God. And it's the way that I start my morning every single morning before I do anything. Yes, I take my boys to daycare or to school. But when I get home, before I do any sort of work, I sit with God. And it's not about asking for answers. I almost call them like my business meetings with Him. And it's just my intentional time with Him. But sometimes it's just about sitting in His presence. And the thing that I've learned is sometimes when what we think is a decision problem, it's actually an identity problem. We often are so focused on making the right choice that we forget who we are and whose we are. And, in all of this, I felt like, when I was receiving all of these messages, it hit home for me. But I felt like there are probably others out there that are sitting here today that are faced with these things that are weighing heavy on your heart. And I want you to hear this. You do not have to see the whole staircase. You don't have to have every single part of it figured out. And this is coming from what I like to call like a recovering perfectionist, because I like to have it all mapped out. The thing that you need to know is that you just have to have that next faithful step. And oftentimes that step can be scary. But the thing about it is that it's not about the fear. And maybe it doesn't make sense to other people. Maybe it is what you feel like too big or too bold. I want you to think about, in those times, Peter, when he stepped out on the boat and he experienced that miracle. He was the only one that was willing to step out on that boat, and something incredible happened. And I encourage you that if you're somebody who is feeling that way, head over to our Eden and Empire community, and not just the membership aspect of it. We have our free community, but I want to go deeper into this because I want these to be the type of deep conversations that we have, because these are questions that business owners have all the time. And sometimes it's about seeing it from a different lens or a different perspective, or somebody who is kingdom minded or knows this world to be able to tell you to look at things in a different perspective, to sometimes surrender, to sometimes say those big decisions that you're facing are that you're lost in your identity, and knowing that you are a child of God, and that can help you make those decisions a lot easier. So if you need a prayer, if you need some insight, if you need anything, I want to have those deep conversations, because I feel like those are things that we are struggling with in silence that we often don't share. So I'm going to encourage you in this to actually reach out to me. And I know that I say this in my podcast episodes, but let's link arms and walk on this journey together. And I genuinely mean that. And in all of this, as you're going through your day and you have your perfectly planned content all mapped out, you might have your marketing strategy, you might have your next business to-do list sheet out, whatever it is, make sure that you're viewing it with the lens of taking a faithful step and incorporating God into that decision. So I want to invite you back here on Friday when we dive a little bit deeper into more of these business strategies. So until next Friday.